In my family, they always said life is like a Shabbat candle. It burns longest when you tend it gently, without rushing the flame. My name is Abraham, and I'm 78 years old now, sitting here in my little apartment in Haifa, Israel, where the sea whispers secrets to the shore every night. I was born here, but my roots go deep into the soil of Odessa, in what was then the Soviet Union, now part of the Russian Federation. My parents fled there during the Troubles, carrying stories from the old country like fragile heirlooms. We weren't rich, far from it. Our home was a simple stone house on the edge of the city, filled with the smell of fresh challah on Fridays and the murmur of Yiddish prayers at dusk. I grew up at my grandfather's knee, listening to tales from the Torah that weren't just words on a page, but maps to the human soul. He was a tailor, like so many of us, mending not just clothes, but broken spirits with his quiet wisdom. But let me tell you, those early lessons came with a heavy price. I watched my father, a good man named Isaac, pour his life into hard work, long days in the market, scrimping every shekel to provide for us. He followed the family rules to the letter. Eat simply, rest on the Sabbath, honor your body as God's temple. Yet at just 55, his heart gave out, worn thin by the weight he carried without complaint. I was there when the doctor shook his head, saying it was stress, the kind that eats you from the inside. That loss hollowed me out, left a stone in my own heart. Why did the righteous fade so young, while others, battered by storms, seemed to endure? It shook me to my core, made me question every proverb I'd ever heard. And then there was my Uncle Moshe, my father's older brother, who lived to be 102, defying every odd. He faced wars, poverty, even betrayal that would break most men. His face, lined like an old scroll, always carried a quiet smile. What secret did he hold that let him outlast the world? What I uncovered about his life and the wisdom passed down in our family shattered everything I thought I knew. This isn't the simple advice you find in books or hear at synagogue lectures, those tidy rules about health and virtue. No, it's a raw, sometimes cruel truth, one that heals only after it cuts deep. It's the kind of revelation that family elders whisper in the dim light of the evening after the children are asleep. Uncle Moshe was just an ordinary tailor in post-war Israel, stitching suits for neighbors in our Haifa neighborhood. He seemed to live by the basics: a modest meal, a walk to the minyan each morning, words of kindness to anyone who crossed his path. But beneath that simple life lay a riddle that haunted me for years. Why did his days stretch so long, even as tragedy piled upon him, like losing his wife Leah to illness in their 60s or watching his shop burn down twice? It wasn't luck or genes, it was something hidden in the soul, a law of life, that turned suffering into strength. And when I finally pieced it together, it changed how I saw my own years slipping away. Have you ever paused in the quiet of your own home and wondered why some people grind through pain and loss, yet wake up each day with fire in their eyes, while others who play it safe seem to wither before their time? Why does hardship sometimes shorten lives and other times carve them deeper, longer? If you've felt that pull, the exhaustion of chasing the right path only to hit walls, then this story is for you, my friend. Pull up a chair. Imagine we're sharing a cup of tea as the sun sets. Let me take you back to my childhood, to a Seder night in our Odessa home, when the air was thick with the scent of matzo and bitter herbs. My grandfather, Aaron, told a little parable about a bird, a word released into the wind. It flies free, he said, carrying your truths or your regrets, but it always circles back to you. One night after my father collapsed, I couldn't sleep. I wandered to the kitchen and found Uncle Moshe there, his hands trembling as he lit a single candle. He didn't preach, he just shared a memory from his youth during the famine years in Russia. A neighbor had accused him of hoarding food, a lie that spread like wildfire. Moshe could have fought back, held on to the anger like a rope around his neck. But he chose silence. then forgiveness, not out of weakness, but because he saw how grudge weighed heavier than hunger. That choice, he whispered, added years to his step. Yet even then, I sensed there was more, a shadow behind his calm eyes, a storm he never fully voiced. And as I dug into his life later, that bird came back with a message that turned everything upside down. The real enemy isn't out there in the world. It sits at your own table, disguised as your deepest fear. That bird from my grandfather's tale stayed with me, circling in my thoughts as I began to unravel Uncle Moshe's story. You see, in our family, the elders didn't just tell parables, they lived them, passing down keys to a longer life like threads in a well-worn tallit. But these weren't flashy secrets, no magic herbs or forbidden rituals. They were simple truths, drawn from the Torah and the hard lessons of survival. Yet as I pieced together Moshe's days, I found each one had a shadow, a twist that made the light burn brighter. Let me share the first of these keys, the one that seems so straightforward, like the air we breathe. The first truth our family held dear was to honor your body as a temple, treating it with the respect the Almighty demands. It's right there in the teachings. Eat what nourishes, not what tempts. Rest when the world demands you push on. In Moshe's youth, back in Odessa during those lean years after the war, this rule was his anchor. He was a young man then, barely 20, working the docks from dawn till dusk, hauling crates under a sky that seemed forever gray. But come Friday, no matter the storm, he'd stop. Shabbat wasn't negotiable. A holy pause, a chance to light the candles with Leah, his new bride, and share a simple meal of bread and soup. He walked to the minyan every morning, not driving or rushing, letting his legs carry him through the cold streets. And his diet? Plain as the earth, fresh vegetables from the market, fish twice a week, no excesses that could cloud the mind or weaken the frame. I remember him telling me once, over a cup of hot tea in our Haifa kitchen, how that discipline kept him strong when others fell ill. During a harsh winter flu that swept the neighborhood, Moshe stayed upright, tending to the sick while neighbors lay abed. "The body is a gift," he'd say, quoting the sages, "and to misuse it is to spit on the giver." It worked for him. By 30, he had the build of a man twice as rested, and that vitality carried him through the emigration to Israel, the long sea voyage where seasickness claimed so many. Folks in the family pointed to him as proof. Follow this rule, and your days stretch like the desert horizon. It seemed ironclad, a foundation no one could shake. But here's where the first shadow fell, my friend, a doubt that crept in like fog off the Mediterranean. As I sifted through old letters and talked to those who knew him young, I realized honoring the body wasn't enough if the spirit rebelled inside. Moshe's pauses on Shabbat? They hid a restlessness, a gnawing worry about providing for Leah that made his rest feel like chains. That winter flu he survived? He later confessed to me in a quiet moment that he'd pushed too hard before it hit, ignoring the fatigue until his body screamed. The rule held, but blindly following it without listening to the soul's whispers could turn temple into prison. And that led me to wonder, was Moshe's strength real, or just a mask for the storm brewing beneath? It unsettled me, made me see how this simple key could bend under unseen weight. From that foundation, the family wisdom deepened with the second key. Forgive, to free the heart, releasing grudges before they fester like an untreated wound. It's a lesson echoed in the prayers we say at Yom Kippur, asking not just for our own pardon, but to grant it to others. Moshe learned this the hard way in his early 30s, after we settled in Haifa. He'd saved every penny from his tailoring to open a small shop on the bustling Carmel market, stitching hems for the new immigrants pouring in. But a partner, a man named David from the old neighborhood, betrayed him, skimming profits and vanishing with the savings one rainy night. The loss hit like a knife. Moshe could have chased him down, cursed his name in the minyan, let the bitterness root deep. Instead, he chose the path of peace. He joined the evening prayers more fervently, whispering forgiveness under his breath as the rabbi led the Amidah. And one day, months later, when David slunk back, broken and begging, Moshe didn't turn him away. He shared a meal at his Shabbat table, simple chicken and potatoes, and said, "The heart is too small for hate. Let it beat for tomorrow instead." That act mended more than money. It built alliances. Neighbors who heard the story brought their business to Moshe, and his shop thrived. He lived with a lighter step, his laughter echoing through the market. Even in his 80s, he'd credit that forgiveness for easing the pressures that shortened so many lives. How holding on to anger is like carrying a stone in your heart, weighing down every breath. Our family saw it as proof. Let go, and your years gain wings. Yet the second twist hit me harder, a troubling fact that peeled back the calm surface of Moshe's tale. In that hidden journal I found tucked in his attic, yellowed pages from those Haifa days. He admitted the forgiveness wasn't pure. Beneath the words of peace, resentment simmered, born from a deeper wound. David's betrayal echoed the losses Moshe carried from the war, men he'd trusted who turned away in fear. He forgave publicly, joined the minyan with a smile, but privately it ate at him, manifesting in sleepless nights and a cough that lingered for years. This tied straight to the riddle of his longevity. Why did the heart he freed still bear scars? It wasn't failure of the rule, but a reminder that true release demands facing the root, not just the branch. I sat with that journal under the olive tree in my yard, feeling the chill of realization. What if the grudges we think we've dropped are the very chains that, if confronted, unlock even more life? That unease pushed me to the third key, where the wisdom turned inward to the psychological depths. Speak your truth, even when it hurts, because words unspoken are birds that peck at your insides until they hollow you out. The Talmud teaches that the tongue holds the power of life and death, and in our family we learned early that silence on heavy matters ages you faster than time itself. Moshe embodied this in his 40s during a family crisis that tested us all. His brother, my father Isaac, had fallen ill, the stress of the business mounting like a debt. Moshe could have stayed quiet, nodding along at the Shabbat table as worries swirled unspoken. But he didn't. One evening, after the blessings over the wine, he pulled Isaac aside and spoke plainly. "Brother, you're killing yourself with this pride. Hand over the reins. Let the young ones help. Hiding your fears won't make them vanish. It'll bury you." It was raw, uncomfortable, cutting through the polite veil we all wore. Isaac bristled at first, but Moshe's honesty sparked change. He stepped back, shared the load with me and my cousins, and his health steadied. Moshe's own life mirrored it. By voicing his doubts about the shop's future to Leah, they navigated lean times together, her counsel strengthening their bond. He often said, "Truth spoken in love is the yeast that raises the dough of days." Those candid talks at family gatherings, even the hard ones, kept connections alive and his mind sharp well into old age. We in the family whispered it as a secret extender of life. Let your words fly true, and they return with vitality. But the third revelation shook me deepest, a detail from Moshe's past that cracked the mystery wide. Digging into letters from his immigration days, I uncovered how, in a moment of desperation on the boat to Israel, he'd lied to officials, to fellow passengers, about his family's health to secure passage. It saved them, but the guilt lodged like a thorn, unspoken for decades, fueling anxieties that nearly broke him in his 50s. He confessed it only years later, to a rabbi during a private study of the Torah, and the release added a decade of peace to his step. This exposed the heart of the riddle. Suppressed truth doesn't just shorten bonds, it accelerates the body's decay from within. As I read those faded words, I felt a chill. How many of us carry such silences, thinking they protect when they steal our years? Those faded letters from Moshe's immigration days weighed on me like the fast of Tisha B'Av, a reminder that unspoken burdens don't just linger, they consume. But as I delved further into his life, the family wisdom revealed its hidden layers, laws not scrawled on scrolls, but etched in the soul's quiet battles. These weren't add-ons to the surface truths. They were the undercurrents that turned survival into endurance. Moshe's story in his middle years, from 40s to 60s, became my guide. Times when loss and fear tested him like fire refines gold. The fourth key emerged from the ashes, a paradox that still humbles me. To live long, you must embrace loss, surrendering what you cling to hardest, for only in letting go do you gain the strength to rise again. It's like the tale of Jacob wrestling the angel through the night. Victory comes not in escape, but in the struggle that reshapes you. Moshe faced this in his 50s when the second fire claimed his Haifa shop. The first blaze, years earlier, had been an accident, a lantern tipped in the night. But this one? Whispers said it was arson, rivals jealous of his steady trade. He lost everything, the sewing machines he'd saved for, bolts of fabric from Europe, even the ledger of debts that tied his name to the community. Standing amid the smoke with Leah at his side, clutching their young son, Moshe could have raged, rebuilt with vengeance in his heart. Instead, he turned to the rituals that anchored us, gathering the family for a hasty minyan in the ruins, reciting psalms under the stars. "Loss is the Almighty's pruning shears," he murmured, drawing from the Torah's stories of exile and return. From those ashes, he didn't just rebuild, he transformed. He started small, mending clothes door to door, but shared his skills freely with war widows, teaching their sons the trade. The community repaid in ways money couldn't. Loyal customers shared Sabbaths that filled his home with warmth. That surrender added decades. By 70, Moshe walked straighter than men half his age, his body unbowed by the grief that crushes others. In our family talks, we'd nod to this law: cling too tight and life slips away. Release and it flows back multiplied, like manna in the desert. But that wasn't the bottom of this tale. I dug deeper and found what no one expected, a shadow that made the embrace of loss even more profound. In Moshe's private reflections, scribbled after those minyan gatherings, he revealed the fire wasn't just fate. It stemmed from his own risks, overextending the business on a hunch to help a struggling cousin, ignoring the warnings in his gut. The loss wasn't imposed. It was a mirror to his unspoken fears of inadequacy, fears rooted in the Odessa famines where he'd failed to save a friend. Facing that truth, rather than denying it, purified him. It tied to the riddle of his longevity. Embracing loss meant owning your role in it, turning victimhood into wisdom. As I traced those lines by lamplight, a paradox hit me. The very act of surrender invites more life, but only if you stare into the void it creates. How many of us rebuild without healing the root, only to invite the next blaze? That void led me to the fifth key, an even knottier law of the Spirit. Laugh in the face of fear, for joy is the oil that keeps the lamp of life burning through the darkest nights. The Proverbs whisper it, a merry heart does good like medicine. But in our family, it was more than cheer. It was defiance, a way to disarm the shadows that shorten days. Moshe mastered this in his 60s when illness first knocked, a stubborn cough that doctors in Haifa blamed on the shop's dust, but which lingered like an uninvited guest. Leah fretted, the family hovered with remedies from the old country. But Moshe? He met it with humor, dark and wry, the kind that bubbles up from the belly. At the Shabbat table, as we passed the gefilte fish, he'd quip about his lungs, taking a vacation in Egypt, like our ancestors. or joke to the doctor that he'd outlive the pyramids if they just let him sneeze in peace. It wasn't denial. It was alchemy. Those laughs lightened the air, eased Leah's worry, even coaxed reluctant smiles from me during my own grief over father. And medically, the cough faded slower than expected, but his spirit stayed buoyant, boosting what the sages call the body's natural repair. He shared stories of it later, in his 80s, chuckling over tea. Fear is a thief that steals your tomorrows, but laughter picks its pocket. It wove through his days, teasing grandchildren during Hanukkah games, turning market hagglers into friends with a witty retort. Our family saw the proof in his clear eyes and steady hands. This law extended life by melting the ice of dread that hardens the arteries of the soul. The fifth twist came as the strongest blow, an emotionally charged story from my own days as a listener and guide in the Yeh community, one that illustrated this law and cracked Moshe's mystery further. You see, after Father's passing, I took to helping at the local center, offering an ear to those weighed down, much like the rabbis in Talmudic times. There was a man named Chaim, a friend of Moshe's, solemn as a gravestone, who faced a similar illness in his 70s. Chaim followed the rules, rested, forgave old slights, but his fear turned inward, a silent storm that left him bedridden, dying young at 78 from what the doctors called giving up inside. I sat with him those last weeks, urging him to voice it, but he couldn't laugh, couldn't pierce the gloom. Moshe, hearing of it, visited once, wheezed a joke about death being just a long nap after too many late-night worries, and for a moment, Chaim's eyes lit. But it was too late. The damage was done. That loss tore at me. I'd failed to spark the joy in time. Yet with another soul, a young widow named Rivka struggling after losing her husband, Moshe's way saved her. In her darkest hour, he shared a candle-lit evening of stories, laughing through tears about his own brushes with the end, turning her fear into a shared spark. She lived vibrantly into her 90s, crediting that night. As I recounted this to Moshe years later, tears stung my eyes. He placed a hand on mine and said, "The laugh isn't to forget the fear, it's to dance with it." This personal wound tied back to his longevity. His humor wasn't innate. It was forged in facing the voids we'd uncovered, a tool that prolonged not just years, but their quality. I wept then, realizing how close I'd come to the same trap, my own sorrows nearly snuffing my light. Those tears I shed with Moshe that evening didn't dry easily, my friend. They watered the ground for what came next as I chased the full tapestry of our family's wisdom. By then, I'd uncovered 5 keys from his life: the temple of the body, the freedom of forgiveness, the flight of honest words, the surrender to loss, and the spark of defiant laughter. But they weren't isolated threads. They wove together like the fringes of a prayer shawl, each strengthening the others in ways I hadn't seen at first. As I pored over Moshe's journal and the old family codex, a handwritten book of Proverbs my grandfather Aaron passed down, hinting at 10 such laws in all, I began to see the pattern. Moshe's longevity to 102 wasn't from following one rule in isolation, like a man building a wall brick by brick. No, it was the dance between them. Honoring his body gave him the stamina to forgive, but only when paired with truth spoken aloud did the heart truly lighten. Embracing loss without laughter, it would have crushed him, turning ashes to despair. But together they formed a cycle, a quiet rhythm that turned the storms of Odessa and Haifa into the very wind beneath his wings. I remember sitting on the balcony overlooking the sea, the codex open in my lap, as pieces clicked. The my remaining keys, ones like cultivating silent gratitude each dawn, forging unbreakable ties at the Shabbat table, learning from elders without resentment, accepting the impermanence of all things, and seeking purpose in every small duty. They amplified this web, making hardship not a thief of years, but a sculptor of depth. Then it hit me, sharp as a sudden rain. It wasn't about health or forgiveness alone, or even the humor that masked pain. It was simpler, scarier. Life prolongs when you learn to dance with its shadows, inviting the full spectrum instead of hiding from the dark. Moshe's riddle solved itself in that moment. His 102 years stemmed from this integration, a family legacy that transformed betrayal and fire into quiet, enduring power. He didn't conquer age, he befriended it, letting the 10 laws flow like the Jordan River, carving a longer path through the valleys. For me, it was catharsis after years of doubt. Father's early death now made sense not as failure, but as a life unlived in full harmony. And for you, listening now, it might whisper the same. Your own years hold this potential if you weave the threads with courage. But understanding is one thing, living it is another. And that's where our family offered a simple ritual to bridge the gap. A practice Moshe swore by, one that helped him align these keys and ease the weight of aging. He called it the shadow talk, a weekly moment of raw honesty, done alone under the stars or by candlelight, much like the Modeh Ani prayer we murmur at dawn to thank the Creator for returning our souls. Here's how it works, my friend, passed down with the Codex. Every Friday after the Shabbat candles are lit, but before the family gathers, find a quiet corner in your home. Light a single beeswax candle, its flame steady like the light of Torah. Sit with a journal or just your thoughts and whisper to your shadow. Name one fear that's clung to you that week, the grudge unspoken, the loss you're resisting, the truth you've buried. Then counter it with one gratitude, small as a drop of honey. A laugh shared, a body that carried you through the day, a forgiveness that lightened your step. Speak it aloud, softly, as if confessing to an old companion. Moshe did this nightly in his later years, blending it with Torah reflection, reading a verse on joy or surrender, then applying it to his shadows. It's not magic, he'd say, but it tames the beasts inside, letting the laws breathe. I tried it after finding his journal, that first night voicing my grief over father while thanking the sea for its endless patience. Something shifted. The stone in my heart softened, and sleep came deeper, my body feeling years younger. For those facing illness or loneliness, it became a lifeline. Rivka, the widow I mentioned, used it to laugh at her fears, extending her vibrant days. Chaim might have lived longer if he'd faced his shadows this way. Try it yourself. Start small, once a week, and watch how it aligns the keys, turning psychological weight into wisdom that adds not just years, but meaning to them. It's the family's gift to you. No grand ceremony, just a conversation with the self, rooted in our traditions to carry you through the long haul. That shadow talk ritual became my bridge to the final revelation, my friend, as I sat night after night with the candle flickering, letting Moshe's life unfold like a well-kept Torah scroll. The 10 keys from our family codex. The body as temple, forgiveness freeing the heart, truth as uncaged birds, loss as a refining fire, laughter disarming fear, quiet gratitude whispered at dawn like Modeh Ani, enduring ties forged at the Shabbat table, learning from elders without bitterness, accepting impermanence as the rivers flow, and seeking purpose in every humble duty. They weren't a checklist to check off for long life. No, the deepest law, the one that bound them all, hit me like a thunderclap over the Haifa hills. Longevity isn't a battle you wage against time, with diets or denials. It's an invitation you extend by surrendering control, allowing the wisdom of generations to flow through you like a gentle river, not a dammed-up flood of resistance. Moshe lived to 102 not because he mastered rules, but because he stopped fighting life's current. In his youth, gratitude at sunrise kept him grounded amid Odessa's chaos. In midlife, those unbreakable family ties, nights of stories with Leah and the grandchildren, wove a net against isolation's toll. He learned from elders like grandfather Aaron without envy, their proverbs becoming his compass, and accepted the comings and goings of fortune as the seasons of the Jewish year. Joy in spring, reflection in autumn. Every day he sought purpose in the small, a stitch for a neighbor, a prayer for the weary, turning routine into ritual. This surrender wasn't weakness, it was the ultimate paradox, a psychological law where yielding to the shadows, fears, losses, truths, unleashes the vital force the sages called neshama, the divine breath that sustains. For Moshe, it meant his body didn't war with age. It harmonized, extending years into a tapestry rich with meaning. As I traced this in the codex's faded ink, the riddle dissolved. His endurance was the fruit of flow, not force, a truth our family guarded like the eternal light in the ark. It healed my old wounds, showed Father's early end as a dam broken too soon, and offered me, at 78, a path to my own fuller days. What do we do with this then? We don't flee our demons, those inner storms that threaten to shorten our steps. We face them with a smile, embrace our shadows, for they hold the very years we seek. There's hope in this law, my friend, a quiet power that turns the ordinary into the eternal. Moshe's legacy lives in me now, in the way I light my candles, share my tea, and whisper gratitudes at dawn. It can live in you too. Let the river carry. You, weaving the 10 keys into your rhythm, and watch how life responds, not with endless tomorrows, but with days that feel timeless. I've found peace in sharing this, mirroring the calm Moshe wore like a second skin, and I hope it stirs the same in your heart. If this story touched your soul, share it with someone wrestling their own shadows. They might need this light. In the comments, tell me which twist hit you hardest. Subscribe to unravel more soul-deep mysteries with me. Take care of yourselves. Remember, true longevity is the courage to be real with your heart, even when it stings.